We're looking at the #1 New York Times bestseller that just dropped, The Invisible Coup: How American Elites and Foreign Powers Use Immigration as a Weapon. It's by Peter Schweizer.
And if you know Schweitzer's work, you know he doesn't exactly do light reading.
Oh, not at all. He goes straight for the jugular. Usually it's corruption, institutional failure.
Exactly. He's the guy who follows the money. But this time, he's following the people. Or, I guess more accurately, the movement of people.
And the core idea here is, it's really provocative. He's not just saying it's a crisis. He's arguing that what looks like a chaotic humanitarian problem is actually a highly organized strategic operation.
He has a name for it, too. Strategic engineered migration.
Exactly. And, we should be really clear with everyone listening. This is a heavy book. It's very politically charged.
Well, for sure.
It's making huge waves in D.C. right now because it just takes the incompetence defense completely off the table. Schweizer isn't saying the government is failing to stop this.
No.
He's arguing that some parts of the government, along with foreign powers, are actively facilitating it. He calls it a weapon of asymmetric warfare.
And that's the key phrase, isn't it? Asymmetric warfare, because it shifts the whole conversation from, policy failure
to national security threat.
Precisely. And look, our job today isn't to tell you whether this is right or wrong. Our job is just to take this massive, controversial text and break down how he builds his argument.
Because if he's right, or even just, half right, the implications for national sovereignty are just wild.
It changes everything. I mean, if you accept his premise, you can't look at a news report about the border the same way again.
No. You don't just see a refugee anymore. You might see, in his view, a geopolitical pawn.
So let's get into the mechanics of this invisible coup. The title itself, it suggests a takeover, right? But a coup is usually generals and tanks.
Right, seizing the radio station.
But Schweitzer's talking about something much, much quieter.
He calls it covert political subversion. His argument is that, traditional warfare against the U.S. is basically impossible. No one can win that head-to-head.
So they found a backdoor.
They found a backdoor, the U.S. immigration system. It's the ultimate gray zone tactic, like you said. You exploit your adversary's biggest strength.
In this case, our openness, our laws.
Our due process laws, our sense of compassion. And you turn them into vulnerabilities. He really goes after what he calls the compassion narrative.
The idea that we're conditioned to see this only through a humanitarian lens?
Yes. People fleeing poverty or violence. Schweizer argues that that narrative is the camouflage. It's the shield that foreign governments use to inject their influence directly onto American soil without us, firing back.
It's a brilliant strategy if you think about it. It's cynical, but brilliant. If you send soldiers, it's an act of war.
No question.
But if you send migrants and the U.S. pushes back, suddenly the U.S. looks like the bad guy on the world stage. It paralyzes any kind of defense.
That's the invisible part of the title. But the coup part, that implies there's a specific goal.
Right.
He argues the objective isn't just to cause chaos. It's to alter the political DNA of the country, shifting demographics, reshaping elections, and ultimately changing U.S. policy from the inside out.
Okay, so let's break down the players he identifies. The book is split into two main groups, right? Foreign powers and domestic elites.
That's right.
Let's start with the foreign powers. He mentions Venezuela, but he really focuses on two heavy hitters, Mexico and China.
And their strategies are completely different. It's fascinating.
So let's start with Mexico. I think historically, most of us think of the Mexican government as just being passive in all this. They just let people pass through their country.
But Schweizer claims it's much, much more active than that. He details how Mexico uses its consular network inside the United States.
Okay, let me just play devil's advocate for a second. Every country has consulates, right? That's just standard diplomacy. How does he get from diplomatic support to political subversion?
It's the scale and the function. He argues that Mexico's consular network here is the largest and most sophisticated in the world. And it functions less like a diplomatic outpost.
And more like?
More like a political machine. He points to the sheer number of them and what they do. They issue special ID cards that can get you into U.S. banking systems. They fund legal defense for migrants fighting deportation.
So they're actively working against U.S. enforcement.
Actively. And lobbying local U.S. governments against that enforcement. It's basically a state-sponsored lobbyist group embedded inside the country.
A lobbyist group that also organizes its own constituency.
That's the key. Schweizer says they are mobilizing the migrant diaspora to act as a political bloc that serves the interests of Mexico City. If you can organize millions of people inside your rival's borders, you suddenly have huge leverage over their domestic policy.
It's a Trojan horse, but instead of soldiers, it's voters and activists.
Exactly. And the most shocking part, according to the book, is that it's all happening in plain sight. It's all under the guise of, protecting our citizens abroad.
Wow. Okay, now let's pivot to China. Because their strategy, the way he describes it, feels so much more long-term, almost generational.
It is. He actually coins a term for it. He calls it the Manchurian generation.
Like the Manchurian candidate, the sleeper agent.
Right. But instead of brainwashing one person, he argues Beijing is systematically exploiting the 14th Amendment birthright citizenship.
So birth tourism, we've heard about that before.
It's more than that. He says it's not just wealthy families wanting a backup plan. He presents evidence suggesting it's state-directed. It's a 50-year game.
A 50-year game.
You establish a generation of people who are legal American citizens. They can vote, run for office, get top-secret security clearances, but their cultural and financial loyalties are still tied back to the CCP.
That's a staggering thought. Using our own constitution as like a vector for foreign influence.
And unlike the Mexico strategy, which he frames as a kind of mass mobilization of the working class,
This is more targeted.
this is elite capture. It's about placing people in high-leverage positions in tech, in research, in government. It's quality over quantity.
So you've got this pincer movement, Mexico pushing from the bottom up with mass numbers, China pushing from the top down with elite infiltration.
That's the foreign threat he outlines. But that brings us to what is easily the most explosive part of the book,
The inside job.
the inside job.
This is where he really lobs the grenade. Because, foreign adversaries trying to gain an advantage, that's just geopolitics. That's what they do.
Right, that's almost expected.
But he's claiming this so-called coup is being actively facilitated by Americans.
American elites, as the title says. He's talking about a specific triangle of power: politicians, big business, and the non-governmental organizations, the NGOs.
The NGO complex. I think this is the part that a lot of people might find the most shocking. You see a nonprofit helping refugees, and the natural reaction is to think, okay, they're doing good work.
But Schweitzer, true to form, follows the money.
Of course he does.
And what he finds is that these aren't just little charities handing out sandwiches. They're massive, often federally funded organizations that act as the logistical arm of this whole operation. He calls them the travel agents for the invisible coup.
So wait, the government is paying the NGOs
Billions.
to facilitate the movement of people that the government is supposedly trying to manage or control.
That's what he calls the perverse incentive loop. Their funding, their very existence, depends on the crisis continuing. If the border were ever truly secure, a lot of their federal funding would dry up.
So they have a financial incentive to keep the pipeline open.
A massive one. It's the immigration industrial complex.
But it's not just about money, is it? He argues there's an ideological component, too.
There is. He accuses these domestic elites of actually wanting to dilute traditional national identity. This gets into the cynical political calculation.
The idea that you can import a new electorate that's more favorable to your side.
Right. If you can't convince the current voters, you change the voters. And he argues that the lack of assimilation we see is a feature, not a bug.
How so?
Well, if these new groups integrated fully, they'd just become average Americans. They wouldn't be as useful as a distinct political bloc. So he says the NGOs and their political allies encourage multiculturalism over assimilation to keep these groups separate, dependent, and mobilizable.
Which connects right back to the Mexican consular strategy we were just talking about.
It's all connected. If you keep the diaspora distinct, they remain loyal either to their home country or to the political party here that promises them the most.
And that's why he uses the word coup. It's not just about changing policy. It's about overthrowing the existing political order, facilitated by people sworn to uphold it.
It's a very heavy accusation. It alleges a profound betrayal of the social contract.
So if we accept this framework for a moment, that this is a weapon wielded by foreign powers and domestic elites, what's the end game?
The endgame, he argues, is the erosion of the nation-state itself. If you erase the border and you dilute the meaning of citizenship, the United States stops being a sovereign country.
And just becomes an economic zone.
Exactly. Which is fine if you're a multinational corporation, but a disaster if you're a citizen. And this is what leads to his proposed solutions.
Right. He doesn't just diagnose the problem. He says we have to fundamentally shift how we think about this.
We have to stop treating it like a policy challenge.
Stop thinking of it like taxes or healthcare.
Yes. something you just tweak and manage. He says you have to start treating it as a national security threat.
Which means you're talking about the Department of Defense, not just Health and Human Services.
It means changing the rules of engagement. If this is a weapon, you build a shield. He calls for stricter border controls, obviously, but more than that, he calls for a crackdown on the facilitators.
So breaking that NGO pipeline we talked about.
Defunding the NGOs that he says participate in this, investigating the financial ties, and on the diplomatic front, shutting down the foreign influence operations.
So telling Mexico, for example, you can issue passports, fine, but you cannot run a political organizing campaign on our soil.
Precisely. And closing the loopholes, like birthright citizenship, that he claims China exploits. His argument is that the Constitution was never meant to be a suicide pact.
It's a radical shift. It moves the entire conversation from management to defense.
And that's really the value of a book like this. Whether you agree with every conclusion or not, The Invisible Coup offers a single, cohesive theory for what often feels like chaos.
It connects all the dots. The student visas, the NGO funding, the border surges. It puts them all into one picture, the grand unified theory of the border crisis.
And it explains why the traditional political fixes never seem to work. Because you can't fix a crisis if the people in charge actually see it as a strategy.
That is a chilling thought.
It is. The idea that the system isn't broken, it's working exactly as designed. Just maybe not for you.
We've covered a ton of ground here, from Mexico's consulates to China's Manchurian generation and the NGO complex right here at home. This book, I guarantee it, is going to be the playbook for a lot of people in the next administration.
Oh, absolutely. You are going to hear this language. Weaponization, subversion, sovereignty, a lot more in the coming years.
So before we wrap, I want to leave our listeners with the big central question this book really forces you to confront.
It's a tough one.
Yeah.
We talk so much about compassion. We pride ourselves on being a compassionate nation. But Schweizer forces you to ask, is our compassion being weaponized against us?
And if it is, where do you draw the line? Where is the line between our humanitarian duty and, well, national self-preservation?
At what point does the obligation to the stranger start to erode the obligation you have to your neighbor?
And if you can't answer that question,
You don't have a country anymore. You just have a location.
oof, just a location. That's a brutal way to put it, but it really does cut to the absolute core of this whole debate.
It really does.
Listen, thanks for going on this journey with us.